an entirely new and improved warfare system, unique immersive mechanics based on historical events, new visual improvements with city nightlife, and that's just some of what Victoria 3's improved since launch. But today, I am collaborating with Paradox to show you what Sphere of Influence, the largest expansion for the game ever, is all about, as it comes with the most game-changing new systems yet. And if that piques your interest, I hope you'll consider leaving a like on the video and a comment down below with your thoughts. It's been a good year and a half since Victoria 3 released, and in that time, a lot of people, including myself, have been waiting for an update like Sphere of Influence, because its features are incredibly wide-reaching. And honestly, if you were there with Imperator Rome back in the day, oh my sweet misunderstood Imperator Rome, this kind of feels like Victoria 3's 2.0 moment, even though it's technically 1.7. You see, if you were there on launch, two aspects of this game were criticized for being either not present or underwhelming. The first was Warfare, which thankfully received a massive update last year, and has honestly made Vicky 3's Warfare system one of my favorites in the genre. But the second aspect has had to wait a while longer. That is, until now, and it revolves around the nature of economy, diplomacy, and production. You see, a lot of people felt that Vicky 2 had done a better job here, because in that game, production and investments were essentially entirely dependent on your political system. This meant that in a laissez-faire system, the government, i.e. you, had minimal say, and the vast majority of investments in the country were made by the private sector. And if you enjoy that system, I got some good news for you. Because with Sphere of Influence, Paradox tackles this challenge head-on, and we now have a complete revamp of the way our economy works. Because depending on your economic system, the important mechanics of construction allocation, investment pools, dividends, and nationalization policies change immensely and will have wide-reaching consequences. The most obvious one for the player right off the bat is construction allocation from construction sectors. Used to be that we would use all of these sectors ourselves, but now, depending on your system, the private sector will build and invest in the country alongside you, putting down buildings where they deem it best. If you're playing as one of the industrialized major powers in Europe, who will have interventionism as their system, this means that the entirety of the construction system will be equally shared between the government and the private sector. You can see this in the construction menu in the top right corner where the sectors are divided, and in the construction menu itself, which can now be toggled to show government investment or private investments. And while your ability to invest depends on the national treasury as before, the private sector's ability to invest depends on the investment pool, meaning how much they make from their own buildings. That's right, it's no longer possible to just suddenly change who technically owns all of the buildings in a state on a whim through production methods. Instead, we now have concurrent updates of public and private ownership in real time, where depending on your economic system, both sectors can own factories in every building that allows for it, which tends to be most non-administrative buildings. To take the system further, you can even nationalize buildings one by one for various costs, or you can privatize them by selling it to the private sector, which will provide it with a chance to be bought over time depending on the investment pool and the profitability of the business. This is all assuming that you have the interventionism law, of course, which allows for relatively equal interplay between the private and public sectors. However, this new system allows for much more skewed economies than before, with far-reaching implications. Because while interventionism constitutes a balanced approach, laissez-faire will allocate 75% of your construction sectors to private investors, will make all buildings eligible for privatization, and will disable nationalization entirely. It will, however, also provide you with one more national company, which can be a major boost to the production sector of that company. On the other side of the spectrum, we have command economy, which does pretty much the opposite. It allows for the nationalization of every building in the country, vastly increases the government dividends, which means that the state takes more of the profit, and importantly, it disables privatization and the private investment pool altogether, while interestingly also makes it harder for foreign power blocks to influence them. In other words, this massively changes the way our economies work, and what you must pay attention to when designing and planning the economic makeup of your state. This leads us to Sphere of Influence's other massive half, namely power blocks and leverage, because these also impact your national politics, diplomacy, economy, and who owns what within it. You see, with this new system, diplomacy has for all intents and purposes been expanded like crazy. Power blocks are forms of associations or unions in which several countries come together to form an influential bloc, a sphere of influence if you will. Blocs consist of bloc leaders who are either great or major powers, and bloc members who are all influenced by the leader. Thing is though, blocks are not necessarily economic in nature. The game begins with 5 power blocks already in place, but there is one notable power lacking a block, namely France. However, as France is powerful and influential even in its current form, you're actually able to form a block right away, even though this might sour your relations with the other power blocks. And this is where things get interesting. You see, there are 5 different types of power blocks available to us, and each block uses one of these. So while Great Britain, Russia, and the Ottomans blocks are all sovereign empires, Austria is leading an ideological union, while Prussia is leading a trade league. Thing is though, all of these come with important boons in their selected areas, with one particular extra powerful trait. For example, trade leagues automatically incorporates the new block member into a customs union with the leader. A sovereign empire can turn a bloc member into a subject state, and ideological union leaders can change the regime of a new member if that regime differs greatly from their own. A military treaty allows the bloc leader to add a war goal of their own when aiding a bloc member in a war, and the religious convocation allows the leader to impose their state religion on a bloc member whose current state religion differs from theirs. These powerful abilities only constitute the cherry on top, however, as each of these also impact both the leaders and the member states in different ways, but each one related to their union's aims. This also impacts the available principles of the bloc, which you can expand upon with mandates, which is accumulated over time based on the size and cohesion of the bloc. And in general, the larger the bloc and the more independence desire of the bloc members, the lower the cohesion, meaning expanding a bloc and its powers becomes harder over time. Principles though allow you to further tailor and improve the bloc, adding powerful modifiers to it. So while a trade league can further enhance its members' ability to trade profitably by improving company throughput or decreasing the bureaucracy costs for trade routes between members, a military treaty allows you to create both defensive and offensive pacts, making it impossible for bloc members to wage war on one another, for example. In the same vein, a sovereign empire will encourage the leader to create vassals instead of owning land directly, because their principles revolve around getting increased authority, income, and influence per subject. However, in order to attract new members to your bloc, you need leverage over them, and that is a system not unlike good relations and yet is quite different. Leverage is gained and lost when important diplomatic treaties or actions are signed or made between nations, signaling one nation's political power over the other. For example, guaranteeing the independence of another nation nets you 200 leverage generation, but the overall leverage level is determined by a number of such factors, often related to the overall strengths of the states. In order to ask another nation to join your bloc, you need a significant amount of leverage over them then. This can be achieved in several ways, and Victoria 3 offers a lot of fun new mechanics to increase this leverage, with 2 extremely cool ones in particular. The first is investment rights, which allows one nation to invest in another. This has far more reaching consequences than you might think. If you gain investment rights or an investment agreement with another country, you may now construct factories in their nation, meaning you can exploit their resources for your own gain, while of course in the process help them employ more people locally and potentially increase their standard of living. However, since you now own factories in their country, essentially owning a part of their economy, this gives you leverage over them and might after a while mean that you are becoming more and more powerful in relation to them. This includes your private sector, by the way, who can also increase in the countries where you have rights. Other diplomatic pacts also influence leverage, but mutually beneficial pacts will more often than not skew leverage to either side. However, as great powers continue to fight over the leverage of the same nations in this great game, we also have the possibility to fund lobbies in foreign countries. Lobbies are now important groups acting parallel to your government, and the various parties in your system can join these lobbies as they align with their interests. Lobbies are either pro or anti-foreign nations, but by funding lobbies, you are funding groups that will speak well of your name in your stead, effectively increasing your power within foreign governments. This is important because this also affects yourself, of course, as other countries can do this to you too, but also because as parties join lobbies, a happy lobby usually means a happy party. Catering to lobbies is now almost as important as catering to parties themselves, and can mean the difference between an unhappy party and a content one, and it all depends on how you act towards the nations that are seen in either positive or negative lights by the lobbies. This is measured in levels of appeasement, and changes based on your hostile or friendly actions towards the country in question. In other words, Victoria 3's internal economic mechanics have been vastly overhauled and improved, and are now deeper than ever. With a new system of public and private ownership, we now even have foreign investments with wide-ranging implications for economies and power relations, and we have Power Blocs, massive imperial institutions acting as types of unions on their own, where the bloc leader gains a massive boon to the aspect of state of their choice, allowing them to lobby foreign political parties to support their cause, but also forcing them into competition with other bloc leaders for spheres of influence around the world. This doesn't even touch the many new journal entries given to countries around the world, but particularly with a focus on Persia, where Britain and Russia are vying for influence amidst a growing Persian resurgence. With this update, Victoria 3 has arguably received its first major expansion ever. Since its release, the game has experienced something akin to a renaissance in terms of updates, but in terms of fundamental changes, none are bigger than this one. And with both warfare and the economic and diplomatic systems being leagues and bounds above what they were at release, Victoria 3 continues to prove why it's quickly becoming one of my favorite Paradox games ever. Victoria 3's latest DLC, Spheres of Influence, is available now on Steam, and I highly recommend you check it out and see for yourself how amazing this game has become, especially as Paradox has taken so much feedback to heart. Let me know your thoughts on this DLC and this video in the comments, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, thank you so much to Paradox for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!